Right. All right, everyone, we are back. Thank you very much. We move now to agenda item 7, which is the scrutiny review. Rachel, I believe you're the one taking us through this report.
I am, thank you, Chair.
I believe.
Lovely, thank you. So the report presented to you today, as it details, is to present the committee with a view of the scrutiny arrangements and consider whether any changes should be recommended to Council. It's also to update members on the work being undertaken in response to the Audit Wales recommendations, and also to present the committee with a draft scrutiny protocol following a review which was undertaken in 2024. And it's for the committee to consider any amendments and additions that you may wish to make. So as you all are aware, since 2017, there has been a centralised structure with Corporate Overview Scrutiny Committee, COSC, overseeing the overall forward work programme for the scrutiny committees, and consider and delegate priorities then to the relevant scrutiny committees where necessary in interest of avoiding duplication of effort. The current scrutiny structure then, as you know, is COSC and 3 subject overview and scrutiny committees. In June 2024, the Welsh Local Government Association supported a review of scrutiny in Bridgend, and this was carried out then by an external consultant who spoke to various members and officers. Attached to Appendix 1 then for the committee is a result of that review, and the main recommendations are set out in the report at 2.7. In addition, Audit Wales have undertaken a review of decision-making arrangements in Bridgend, and this concluded that the Council generally has proper decision-making arrangements in place, but does have weaknesses in forward work planning and pre-decision scrutiny, which are undermining their effectiveness. There were 3 recommendations then resulting from that audit linked to scrutiny, and these are detailed in the report 2.8, including forward work programme planning, the role of scrutiny in the decision-making process, particularly in relation to pre-decision scrutiny, and that the Council should ensure it provides greater transparency regarding the remit of different scrutiny committees. They believe that naming the committees 1, 2 and 3 didn't help with the transparency, and particularly from the public perspective, it was a bit of a barrier to encouraging public involvement in the scrutiny process. In light of these reviews and recommendations then, officers have reviewed the current scrutiny structure operating within Bridgend. As the report highlights, there is no definitive guide to how a scrutiny function should be set up. Across Wales, there's many different versions and structures, and it's up to each local authority to determine what suits their organisation. The report therefore sets out some potential options for Bridgend, as well as their pros and cons. I won't go into each option as they are detailed in the report, but I'll happily answer any queries members may have on them. The report identifies that with each option, there are also additional and various factors to consider. And once the preferred option is established, work will be done to consider these, including the final naming. The setting of the remits will also have to have provision for items which overlap committees and a process for dealing with call-ins. At 3.5 of the report, it also highlights that consideration needs to be given to how the scrutiny of the budget setting process is taken forward, with some options presented, including an option to allocate budget scrutiny exclusively to COSC, potentially with some form of working group that could be established with representatives from all scrutiny committees and chaired by the chair of COSC. This is due to the fact that members and officers have commented recently that our current process results in a very intense period of scrutiny in early January, and that is very resource intensive for officers and members. And there does seem to be cross-party feedback that the sessions are repetitive and overlap in subject matters. As indicated in 3.7 of the report, this option, as presented, if taken, could result in additional responsibilities for the chair of COSC, and members may wish to consider whether the increased workload would result in the post being remunerated, and this would be considered further at the AGM. In addition to consideration of the scrutiny structure and the committees, further work has been undertaken in response to the scrutiny review and Audit Wales recommendations. This includes a draft protocol for effective scrutiny, which is attached to Appendix 2 of the report. This sets out the expectations of scrutiny members, the executive, and CMB. There has also been improvement in the way the scrutiny's forward work programme is developed, and this will continue with a view to aligning more closely with the Cabinet forward work programme and the publication of a 6-month forward work programme in line with Audit Wales recommendations. It also assists in meaningful pre-decision scrutiny on key topics, which was also one of the Audit Wales recommendations. The report also highlights the subject to training and provides detail of the more tailored options that have formed part of the member development programme recently. There's also planned to take up the Welsh Local Government Association offer of a self-assessment of scrutiny arrangements, which is a new 2-part improvement programme. However, this might be more effective after some of the changes detailed in the report have been introduced. I would just like to take this opportunity to encourage all members on the subject of training that if you do have any suggestions, please do contact myself, one of my team, or the group leader, or even a representative of the Democratic Services Committee if you identify any other further training needs that haven't yet been identified. And if I can take members to the recommendations then, it is for the committee to consider the information within this report and whether any changes to the current scrutiny arrangements should be recommended to Council, to note and make any comments in relation to the work being undertaken in response to the Audit Wales recommendations, and to consider the draft scrutiny protocol also attached and make any proposed comments and amendments prior to its presentation to Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. I know a number of, in our pre-meeting we discussed it, and there's not many questions, I think, per se. I think there was a number of people who had some comments. So if people do have comments, put your hands up and we can go through them in turn, because I think obviously I want members to have their views heard on this. Councillor Winstanley.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on that. It was set in the report. It mentions that some members are not able to be on scrutiny committees because there isn't enough spaces. And I also wanted to comment that I know that, for example, it was very, very busy in January and December, and I couldn't make a couple of the meetings due to either work commitments or illness, and that happens to everybody. However, are there some members who are on scrutiny who perhaps have not been able to engage in the process at all year, and what is done to check up on them and to see whether or not they still want to be on that scrutiny committee?
Thank you, Councillor Winstanley. Rachel, have you got anything to come back with on that?
In relation to attendance on scrutiny and members, I'm trying to work out my maths calculation in terms of the number. I think it's very few that don't have involvement in scrutiny, because there is 12 on each committee, which does actually allow for 48. So if there is room for every single member to actually sit on a scrutiny committee should they wish to, and that is down to group leaders to engage with their own members and determine if they do or if they don't. My understanding is because some members choose not to, that's why we have some members on, say, 2 scrutiny committees, for example. But there is, with 12 on each committee, there is room for, as I said, every member to sit on a scrutiny committee should they wish to. In terms of whether they are turning up, again, that's down to the group leaders, I'd say, or fellow members to raise this if members do have an issue. We don't monitor that, but I think if, as I said, a particular member has an issue with fellow members, then that's to be raised within their own group, is what I would suggest. As I said, there's the only rule we have, as I said, is a whole authority as members attend meetings within 6 months. That's all I can follow.
Great. Thank you very much, both. Who's next? Councillor Tim Thomas.
Expect me then. Okay, thanks, Chair. Firstly, I just wanted to pay tribute really to the scrutiny officers. I mean, this meeting is a case in point. We're probably going to be here for 4 hours, and Jessica supports us with a pre-meeting as well. So I think our scrutiny is getting certainly more complex, and there's a longevity of meetings. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's a good thing, in fact. I think we're getting really in depth, and I pay tribute to their hard work. They're just for transparency, and if you want to know my opinion on the options, I do favour option 2, the formally themed committees. I think that gives greater transparency. I think it's clearer, and it gives a greater remit, and it allows members to specialise in areas that they're particularly interested in. Moving all that aside, I wanted to touch on task and finish groups. And I know we call them, I can't remember what we call them now.
Research and evaluation panels.
Research, thank you, Rachel. And I have had the benefit, actually, of being a scrutiny officer, a very junior one, and it was, nearly 20 years ago now, and things have moved on, no doubt. But those, while respecting the limited resources that we have and the ongoing demands that both members and officers have, I found those task and finish groups incredibly rewarding and really useful, and they enabled members to understand services in really great detail. And we've just passed a really difficult budget, and I think the use of task and finish groups would really help members understand service delivery to a greater level. I know that BREP is probably potentially going to get a little bit more hands-on, but I'm just wanted to say I'm a real strong advocate of task and finish groups while respecting the limitations in resources. And I just wondered if the leader, well, he's not in, is he? That's a shame. If any of the cabinet had any opinions on what I've just said.
I will have are any of the cabinet in? Oh yeah. Hi Neil, sorry I didn't see you come in. Do you want to go in?
Can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the value of task and finish groups really in helping members get a real in-depth understanding of service delivery. So to be a bit clearer to you, Councillor Farr, I think task and finish groups allow members to come together on a cross-party basis to look at things like qualitative and using things like qualitative and quantitative research methods to really understand service delivery. It's an opportunity to get a bit more hands-on, I think, really. And I was just saying I'm a really strong advocate of those methodologies. I'd be really interested what your views are as a tool for enabling members to have a greater understanding in services.
I am with you on that. I think working groups are really, really good because you're working as a group for the benefit of the authority. My only concern would be, would those groups have the capacity, as we know some people struggle to attend meetings because, you know, some people do have jobs, and I wouldn't want just the usual 2 or 3 people meeting together for it to be truly beneficial. So I think what we could do is go back to the group leaders and speak to their groups to see, would the individual have the capacity to really get together. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Farr. Okay, next up, Councillor Amanda Williams.
Oh, thank you very much. I didn't realise I was first in the queue there. A few things there. First of all, touching on what Rachel said earlier. Now, we have 3 scrutinies, so there's 12 you said on each scrutiny. We have 13 in my group. So we've got 3 scrutinies. We've got 3 positions we get because of political balance on each, which means 4 of mine do not have an opportunity to sit on a scrutiny committee. Now, there is COSC, but we have got 3 of us who are sitting on the scrutiny committees, including our chair, who sit on COSC, and that's the way it's always been. The group leader goes into COSC and the scrutiny chair and another, who is Councillor Tim Thomas, who's our deputy group leader. So that's the way we have done it. So to give everyone a say, we would have to remove ourselves from a scrutiny committee to allow them, and we'd still be 1 short. So we've got a problem where some of ours would like to sit on a scrutiny committee, but there isn't capacity for us within our group. I have similar concerns to Councillor Winstanley with regards to attendance, because whilst it might be a thing for groups, when you've got independents who don't have a group leader and they're not turning up to scrutiny committees, like you said, if it was a council matter and we didn't turn up every 6 months, for 6 months, we wouldn't be a councillor anymore. But I think for scrutiny to be the best it can be, we need to be making sure there's buy-in from everyone. And I understand that the independents don't get a choice on what committees they're given. They're just divvied up afterwards. Having conversations with officers before, that's what I've been told. So we need to make sure that those people are also given the committees that they want to attend and will attend, because if we've got people who want to be in part of the scrutiny process and who are not able to be, and you've got others then who are put in the scrutiny process who are not got any intention to attend, because we have 1 member who has had 0% attendance in the last 6 months. Now, like Councillor Winstanley said, there will be occasions when people won't be able to attend, there will be commitments, but to not engage at all is a different matter, I think, and I think the process going forward needs to have some rules around that and attendance so that we do have the best. when I was first elected back in 2017, that's when we did have names for committees as well. And then we went away from that to the SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3, because we were dabbling in things that weren't specifically relating to education or social services. And so I'm supportive of going back to those named committees, as long as we've got the resource there or something that we can pick up something if we need to look at it in future. My option again would be option 2. I do worry about the staff with Scrutiny. I agree with Councillor Tim Thomas. The staff do a phenomenal job. They're here for hours without the preparation, without all the minutes then. And we've got a very, very small team involved in that. So if I leave it at that, I'll put my hand down and I'll come back and I'll talk about some other things after that, if that's okay, to give others a chance to speak.
No problem at all. Thank you very much for that. Rachel, you've got your hand up. I assume, do you want to come back on some of those things and add a little bit of clarity?
Thank you, Chair. That's great. Yes, and I do take your point, Councillor Williams, in terms of, as I said, the political balance. I wasn't taking that into account in terms of the 48. So it's certainly something we could look at in terms of a restructure and whether there's opportunity possibly, maybe with 1 or 2 more numbers, even potentially on COSC, for example, we could enable a few more of the scrutiny members to actually who want to be on scrutiny to actually formulate it. Unfortunately, as the report states, we did used to have 16 on each committee, and that did allow for anyone and everyone to attend. But likewise, as you said, we ended up having members just fill in positions then. And also it did create a bit of a difficult one in terms of, as you can appreciate, we've got 4 or 5 hour meetings now. With 16 members, we could end up with a lot longer, with members trying to put their views and ask their questions, etc. But it's certainly something I can look at and can consider to ensure that those who do want to engage with the scrutiny process are able to. In relation to the caveat, the options, yes, I completely agree with you, and that's identified in the report that you're right. The reason why we went away from names is one of the main reasons is because members were straying into other remits. And members were pulled back and weren't allowed to look at other things outside of their remit in terms of social services, education. And we can't ignore the fact that 99% of the time topics do cross over. So we are suggesting if some options were put forward, that a caveat would be put in there that members can look at that item in its entirety without worrying about straying into another committee's remit. And I think that would be much more effective really than restricting the remit of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And obviously, Amanda, we'll come back to you when we get down to your hand again. So next up is Councillor Gary Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's an interesting report. Thank you, Rachel. It's I'm a little bit don't really understand how we are going to give a recommendation as a committee on which option is the preferred one, but I'm sure, Chair, you will find a way to do that. It's almost enough, I think, to warrant a side meeting all of its own, isn't it, since it's such an important issue. The structure of scrutiny in the council is one of the critical functions that deserves, I think, a little bit more time than we can possibly afford here. But having said that, for myself, options 3, 4 and 5, I don't think are viable. For me, it's either option 1 or 2 with a preference perhaps for option 2. But again, I don't really see how we as a committee can forward a definitive view on this as things stand, but that's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can give I'm sure Rachel will correct me if I'm wrong, we can give sort of a steer, say that we think this one, as scrutiny is, we think this one will work. And because it's tweaking, if we go for option 2, it's very much like the system we have now, but with tweaking to make it a little bit better. Mark's now waving at me, so I'll bring in the Chief Exec.
Only for clarification, if I may, Chair. So I think we think the view of scrutiny themselves are important, but we are also sharing these options with group leaders and with scrutiny chairs. But ultimately, I should point out in terms of process, any changes to the scrutiny arrangement requires a change to the constitution. Therefore, this will be something that will be voted on at the AGM. So ultimately, that will be the place at which you determine what are your preferred scrutiny arrangements moving forward.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So I think that's sort of clear now where we are. So we'll move on then to Councillor Ross Pennell-Thomas.
At the Chair, I'll try and keep it short and sweet. My viewpoint from the offset is that I prefer option number 2. I think all options provide some positives. I think it's really useful in the way that the report has been set out in terms of the pros and the cons. Can I also associate myself with Councillor Tim Thomas's remarks around the effectiveness and the good, decent work of our scrutiny officers in enabling, empowering and supporting members to hold the administration to account and to get involved in the work of the authority. Having spoken to my own members and other members across the chamber, politically and non-politically, there is a frustration that's borne out in terms of the decision-making processes of the authority. I think if you join the authority as a green-eyed member in 2022 at the beginning of any term, your passion, your energy and your focus is very much one of changing things, but in actual fact, the reality is far from it. And many decisions are made at cabinet level and or at council level, not necessarily at scrutiny, but scrutiny allows people to delve into the workings of the authority and actually to make some really effective, positive changes on policy. So from that perspective, I think option 2 is the way forward. I can't understand how we moved away from named committees. It means nothing to members. And if you asked a majority of members specifically what their committee focuses on, I think you'd have some varied responses. So if that's the case among elected members, we know that's almost certainly the case among members of the public as well. Briefly going back on points around the length of meetings, I really do think this is a point for consideration. This will be going on probably beyond 2, plus the pre-meeting, which I didn't attend. So I'll have been here 4 hours, other members will have been here 5.5 hours. During the budget scrutiny process, there were meetings that were 4, 5, 6 plus hours. I don't know anywhere in business or the public sector whereby that seemed to be an effective use of people's time in terms of the mindset that they have, in terms of considering really key questions. And following some really derogatory social media activity over the weekend with regards to attendance at committee meetings, I'm really pleased that the cabinet member has pointed out that actually people are juggling commitments. We've seen that today in the fact that the leader has been unable to be with us, the deputy leader has been unable to be with us, a cabinet member had to leave early, and there was a cabinet member apology as well. I recognise that happens, but I also think we need to be realistic about the expectations on members as well. So that's my 2 panna. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Pennell-Thomas. You'll be shocked to learn the length of meetings is something myself, Freya and Alex discussed about at great length in our own chairs meetings. We're not entirely sure how we've managed to get to this point where we have 5-hour, 6-hour meetings. As you say, when we served in 2017 to 2022, I don't remember scrutiny committees lasting longer than 2.5 hours. And same Councillor Thomas and Amanda Williams. So I don't know how we've ended up here, but we have. We need to figure out how we manage our time a little bit better, as well as making sure that things aren't missed on the forward work programme. But I will move on now to, I'm sure these hands keep bouncing around. Amanda, you're next on my list. I don't know if you were, but you are now.
I don't think I was, but I am. Oh. That's why I'm getting confused where I am.
Honestly, I thought it was Elaine, and now it's you. So there we are.
Yeah, all right. Well, no, I agree with everything that's been said. I agree with Councillor Ross Thomas. I agree that I think it's good to see, though, there's a lot more engagement this term, I think, in scrutiny than there was last term. And I think maybe that's why we are having longer meetings. But there's also quite a lot on the agendas as well. And we've got a number of reports. When you've got over 100 pages on a report, I mean, and notwithstanding the amount of time it takes to read all those papers, you know, it is a lengthy process. For me, I've talked about attendance now, and the number of spaces on committees and everything. So the next thing is the nitty-gritty of it. I think we need to do more pre-scrutiny. I think spending 4 hours discussing something that's already happened is no good. We need to be having more scrutiny, and if we're spending 4 hours and we have an input into decision making, and that's great. The thing I want to concentrate on more is, it touched on, I think it was Councillor Hugh David in the pre-meeting, was talking about political balance if we were to move forward with regards to having 3 scrutinies and COSC chaired by somebody separate. For me, first of all, I've done a lot of research with regards to scrutiny, and the thing that I've come up with that seems to be around there is that I know it's our constitution at the moment that it's led by an opposition member, is that most people argue that corporate scrutiny committees should be chaired by opposition members to ensure impartiality and prevent potential bias or conflicts of interest. There's a lot of work in that, and I know that's something that will be argued and discussed through group leaders and through Kelly and through Cabinet and everything else outside of this. But I think we need to look at that, and I think political balance here, it's being called upon, because in the pre-meet I said I get an enhanced salary, and Councillor Thomas has alluded to social media and some poor, distasteful posts recently, and I'm being asked, what do I do for my salary? And I've said in the pre-meet I'd more than happily chair the corporate scrutiny meetings if it meant we're saving the council money, because I don't think we've got money to pay for extra chairs of scrutinies. If we had money to spend in scrutiny, I would want to see that on another officer, because they're already worked extremely hard, and I think that's where we need the support. So I'm putting that out there publicly, that I wouldn't mind, I would do it, because I'm already getting an uplifted salary. I won't be criticised for not pulling my weight. I am more than prepared to pull my weight, and I do. And I think the political balance here when it comes to scrutiny is, the reason why we've got it set up like this is because Labour, quite frankly, shouldn't be, or whoever is in the administration, shouldn't be marking their own homework. It should be opposition as well, working to hold all the decisions to account, and the Cabinet and all of the decisions that are made by the Council and the administration to account. So that's all I've got to say for the moment. I know this will probably lead on to the AGM, where we'll have a long debate on this, but that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Elaine Winstanley.
Okay, at the risk of repeating what has already been said, the reason why I put my hand up was because I wanted to make that point about the length of scrutiny meetings. It's very hard for somebody like myself who's juggling a full-time job to know how much time to allocate to meetings if they're put into the calendar to finish at 2 o'clock, for example, and then it actually doesn't finish until 3:30. I do think that the pre-scrutiny meetings haven't always been as useful as you would expect them to be, and they haven't reduced the amount of overall time on the meeting. So I do think that there is room to look at that. Obviously, we've had lots of discussions on chairs of meetings, etc. I'm not going to get into that debate myself, but I just wanted to point out that if we want to make sure that we get as many people as possible involved and attending scrutiny meetings, we need to make sure that it works. And certainly I've been on at least one scrutiny meeting which lasted a very long time and didn't really have adequate breaks, and it was close to contravening health and safety rules. So we do need to make sure that we're allowing adequate breaks. And it was great to have a 15-minute break today, so I got some lunch, so that's brilliant. But it should be, if we're not going to be able to finish it in a morning or an afternoon, that we have an adequate time as scheduled for them. Thank you.
Thank you, and hopefully we won't get to a third break, which I think would be the record if we today, so we'll power on through. Councillor Martin Hughes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I agree. I think option 2 is the most sensible option for us, and to integrate the budget scrutiny as part of the cost, I think makes sense. Just a suggestion in terms of the pre-scrutiny planning meetings, we had start at 9 o'clock. I think that adds on to a very long day, and it might prevent some people, including myself, from actually coming into civic and attend a meeting at 10 o'clock, which I think is more sort of manageable. I just put it out there whether there's a way of, first of all, I think there's a definite benefit of holding pre-scrutiny planning. But is there a way that we could perhaps, instead of having a meeting, have a system where we could publish the question summary and invite email comments from members so that they could be received by Jessica or Meryl perhaps the day before the meeting, and they could then be channeled to the chair, so that you'd have all expressions of interest from members or at what points they want to raise, without having them rehearse them at the pre-scrutiny meeting in person. So I'll just leave that as a possible suggestion of getting around that one.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Rachel, you did have your hand up and then went back down. So,
Chair, can I just very rudely interrupt just to say I need to leave the meeting now? It's 2 p.m. and thanks very much for the contributions today. Cheers.
No worries. Thank you, Ross. Have a nice day. Right, Rachel. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. No, I was just going to come back in and say, funnily enough, Councillor Hughes, I think Councillor Alex Williams actually suggested this in one of our scrutiny chairs meetings. I might just quickly say that I would then say maybe a very quick then pre-meeting would still be needed, but maybe say 10-15 minutes simply to highlight any issues that related to the meeting itself. But yeah, that's certainly something that has been proposed, so it's something we could look into. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much, both. Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. I listened with great interest to everyone's contribution. I find myself in a large area of agreement with Councillor Williams, but also some disagreement. I think it's pretty easy to see why the meetings are as long as they are. The agenda is rather large. There's 160 plus pages in the documentation here. So either we amend the size of the agenda or we increase the number of meetings, it seems to me, as an amateur, the newest councillor here. So, I think some constructive comments along that line would be great. My area of disagreement, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'd rather be in scrutiny, doing the work of scrutiny and not making comments that are politically aimed. In particular, to discuss social media comments. This is not the forum for that, I don't think. And if we were going to talk about distasteful social media comments, then we would probably be here all day.
Okay.
So I don't think that's part of this discussion.
I'll let members go and mention it in passing. Let's, bearing in mind we have been here 4 hours, 5 hours, we start the pre-meeting. Okay, right, thank you.
Very well,
let
Chair.
members mention it, and that's fine, but as far as I'm going to go, we're not going to start having a go at each other about who said what on social media. This is not Mean Girls. This is...
exactly, Chair, that's my whole point.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Marty, you've still got your hand up. Is that a legacy hand, or did I not come back to you when I should have? No, legacy, fantastic. Right, I think there's relevant agreement in the room that we would go for option 2. We can sort of push that forward, and then obviously, as members have alluded to, group leaders, AGM, no doubt this will be discussed, and whom should be the 4 chairs and where should they come from sort of politically. So we'll take that aside, I think, Rachel, for now, and let someone else deal with that. So unless anyone has any further comments they wish to make, I think I'm going to pull that item to a close. No, Rachel, you got your hand up? No doubt I've forgotten to do something now.
No, only very quickly, Chair. I was just going to ask whether there were any comments on the protocol. I'm just conscious that it hasn't had much discussion or many queries, but obviously if you do, you can also email us. Thank you.
Okay. Did members have anything on the protocol? Because Rachel is quite correct. It hadn't got the airing. Apologies for that. I thought the protocol was fine. I think we need to work on how we engage members. I know members have talked about member engagement is up, and some meetings it is, and others it's not. I wonder how we do that, and maybe some of those chairs we go away and look at that. But that would be the big thing, I think, for me, is that how we make sure that everyone feels comfortable and able to ask a question and be heard in scrutiny, because that's the most important thing. I remember doing it the first time back in 2017. So I want to make sure that everyone has their opportunity to have their say. But Amanda, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say maybe it's worth for chairs and group leaders to go back to the groups as well for comments to send in to you, Rachel. But I'm conscious that we are always forgetting then the independents and the Conservative, to make sure that they've got ample opportunity to get involved in this too.
Yeah, no worries, absolutely. And I think we can probably circulate this to them, Rachel and Jess, and make sure they get their thoughts, because I know definitely Jonathan's on stock 3. So I definitely want to make sure that their voices are heard as well in this. So unless anyone else has anything, I don't need a mover and seconder, do I? Do I need a mover and seconder? No, it's not full council. What am I on about? Right then, pull that item to a close. Thank you very much, Rachel, for that. And no doubt we'll return to some stuff in item 8, which is conclusions and recommendations. Okay, so I'm going to ask Jess to go through them. Obviously, there is a lot today, as one can imagine. So please, if you have a point you want to make on the points Jess has already talked about, please put your hand up and I will come to you to try and break it up, because if we get all the way to the end of one, especially the first item, we might sort of forget, because I know I could. So making sure everyone has their opportunity to say on the recommendations. So over to you, Jess.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously members' comments in the closing item were regarding the length of meetings. So with Chair indulgence, I don't propose to recap everything that's been discussed, particularly on the first item, which was quite lengthy, but just to highlight some of the recommendations and requests for information that I have picked up as I've gone through. If, of course, I've missed anything, please obviously do feel free to let me know. Chair consciously said let's pause as we go through, so I can see a hand up. Shall I pause there before I do start?
Yes, let's pause. Maybe Amanda was a bit quick, I don't know, but Amanda.
Yes, I am quick. Sorry, I had one, which was the start of the first item. Only one recommendation, that it was something that they were going to speak to me about, so I wanted to make sure that one was in there. It's when I said about the services some schools use. They buy in for well-being and the support that includes GP access, for private GP access, prescriptions and that, to explore that as an option. That would be my recommendation, to meet with either myself or others who are in the schools who have that, because it might be a way forward of reducing sickness for the authority.
Yeah, fine. I think, Jess said she's got that one, so we'll make sure that that's put in. And do you want to continue?
Yep. Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Williams. Yes, I've made a note about the online access to the GP and as part of the wider wellbeing package that the council offer or could offer. The next point I had was a point raised about councillor access, in particular to I think in particular business plans on the staff intranet and members not having access to certain documents. There was an offer for all members to have copies of the business plans in particular that are alluded to, whilst there's still some testing being undertaken on the intranet, an exploration about perhaps a link to on the councillor portal. Then there was quite a lot of discussion about the staff survey and staff responsiveness and responses from staff, in particular raised around the council not taking positive action. There was an indication that perhaps a paper be brought to COSC detailing the information that's the work that goes on around the staff survey and the working groups and the focus groups that follow. So if members would like to take up that offer in a forward work, adding it to their forward work programme. Moving along to the matter of the IDPs that are in red and haven't been able to commence under the Education Directorate. I think there was some offer from the corporate director that perhaps either this committee or SOC 1 could potentially monitor that situation, again by way of perhaps an information report or a full report to either this committee, as I say, or SOC 1. There was some discussion and some concern amongst members about the specialist provision and regarding pupil behaviour and the impact on waiting lists. There's some representations from the corporate director about the number on those waiting lists. The corporate director did allude to a report that's scheduled to come to SOC 1 on pupil behaviour and exclusions on the 8th of May. So with the committee's approval or back in, that's something that perhaps we could ask be included within the scope of that report. Similarly then, with regards in the support for children with additional learning needs, the corporate director indicated the draft plan has been prepared and written, highlighting that it is a challenge for those children and highlighting the need for capital investment. Again, there was an indication that that could be included in the scope of that report going to SOC 1 in May, and should the committee wish to ask that that be included. There's some discussion around e-learning, I think a couple of points throughout the meeting, and the mandatory e-learning, with the Chief Executive indicating that they're looking at a review of the rollout of the e-learning modules and perhaps some sort of staggered effect for staff undertaking those. I think there was some offer that perhaps they could do some sort of written response regarding the contributory factors affecting those targets, whether that be because staff were on sick leave or perhaps because they were on maternity leave, I think were the two examples given, with potentially, if that's not able to be easily achieved, maybe an amendment to the narrative within the performance dashboards just to reflect that that is unlikely to ever be the 100% in this current year, with an indication that that may change in the next year. Members can just bear with me. There was some discussion then regarding the reds and ambers around the school modernisation, with an indication again that there's a report going to SOC 1 on the 31st of March regarding this particular area. There's a specific question regarding the planning around, whether the planning had gone in for Ysgol y Ferch Ysger, and an indication from the corporate director that he would check with the department and report back to the committee. If that information hasn't been forthcoming already, we can make that request on behalf of this committee. Moving through then to the issue of energy efficiency, the corporate director for communities indicated and highlighted some of the work that her new officer, Kieran, has been undertaking, in particular working with schools, highlighting as well an invest to save model, but also highlighting that they could provide a written response to the committee, highlighting that some more of that work with an indication perhaps that can also be put on the council's website. Then we moved on to the council's response to inclement weather, Storm Dara, the safeguards in place for vulnerable people, and the committee provided some information about the internal and external debriefs that followed from those events. Again, the committee requested that whether that's information that could be shared with this committee or potentially for to come back to a scrutiny session. And what I would highlight there is whether members, similarly to the items going to SOC 1, we can ask for that to be included within the scope for a report that's already been requested to go on to the SOC 3 forward work programme following members' consideration of that particular issue in December. and I believe finally, or not quite finally, we raised the matter of the waste service going in-house possibly by April 2026 is the current date. Corporate Director gave an indication that by June there'll be a clearer indication on whether that date can be achieved or whether there needs to be an extension. And there was some discussion from members as to whether there could be either an all-member briefing session or regular briefing sessions to keep members appraised of the position of the waste service. Apologies, Chair. There was some information offered with regards to the first call resolutions and the amount of calls that aren't resolved on that first call. And I think Martin Morgan's indicated that he would try and find out if they could work out how to apportion those not resolved at the first point of contact and provide a written response to the committee on that. And finally, in relation to budget reduction proposals or budget reductions not yet achieved, there's some discussion regarding the schools in deficit position, and Gareth offered the committee that she would provide a written summary clarifying the figures of the 3.441 million representing the 3% cut rather than the 4.98 million representing the deficit position. For the first item, and you'll be pleased to know I have very few observations on the other reports, but for the first item, that's everything that I've identified, but I appreciate that there may be others that members want to pick up. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Obviously, members do pop your hand up if there's anything you think that's been missed or think we need to highlight. I think the regular briefings for members on the waste service 100% needs to happen. I think members need to be abreast of what's going on. We don't always get the same information, so I think it's important that all members know. And also the extra information we've asked for on the school's budget, which Cara says she's going to write to. I think those are two very important things I think need to be highlighted to officers to get that back. And just on the Storm Dara one, Janine said it was coming to scrutiny. I haven't seen it yet on my forward work programme for SOC 3. It's on my long list, is it? And there's a lot on my long list. So we'll have to figure out where that goes. Probably something to pick up in our meetings. But Tim, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry, somebody rang my door then and I had to go away. So I wasn't quite clear the way that was summarised. Was it summarised just one agenda item or was it in its entirety? If it was in its entirety, there were two bits that I think were omitted. Firstly, with the corporate plan. We
haven't got there yet, Tim.
We haven't got there. There we are.
Great. We haven't got there. Before you start, I thought I'd better tell you now.
Yeah,
we've just done the wellbeing objectives.
No, that's fine.
So we'll
Great.
We'll get to that one next. If anyone else has any further comments. Okay. All right. We'll let Jess go through, and then Tim, I'll bring you in, just in case it's not added.
Yeah, certainly, Chair. Councillor Thomas, you may well wish to add to this item, because I don't have many points on the corporate plan review. I think there was a comment from Councillor Martin Hughes that officers agreed to take away in relation to, whilst accepting, I think, generally amongst officers and members, the need to achieve a balance. Councillor Hughes had asked whether there was merit in keeping the issue of towns distinct from other valley areas, as well as the issue of DFGs being linked in with homelessness, acknowledging that those are two quite large and distinct subject areas. I think there was some general agreement in terms of the direction of travel with this particular item, but some requests perhaps that whether this can be sort of flexible item, the possibility of trialling it for perhaps a 12-month period. And there was an indication from officers that perhaps they'd like to bring this back to COSC at the end of perhaps Q2, maybe the December meeting, whilst obviously a representation from the Chief Executive that the corporate plan delivery plan is looked at annually by members as well, and that level of flexibility. Finally, in relation to any action plans, there was just a commitment that obviously this is just the framework presented to you today, and that offer for this item to come back in back to COSC in December will include that further detail. So I don't know if I've got any of Councillor Thomas's points, so I will pause there, Chair.
No worries. Tim, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I asked a pretty technical question, didn't I? It was a very technical one about EPCs and really whether public buildings required one in the first place. And I suspect they do in some sort. If they don't require an EPC, they require some sort of assessment. I wondered if we could have the EPC level of each of the public sector buildings. So I just thought that'd be really interesting for members. Energy performance certificate, that is, or equivalent to whatever public sector buildings have.
I was trying to do 6 things at once there. Yeah, no problem.
And I think, sorry, Chair, I think what Janine concluded was that some chap called Kieran would have a word with me, but I'm just acknowledging the fact that other members might be interested in this information.
Yeah. Maybe we can have that information circulated. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, anything else before we move on to DFGs? No, okay, Jess, back up to you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. My apologies, I'd misunderstood. We did summarise that one in the first item. I have made a note of that, but I've extended it to include those certificates as well. But yeah, there was that offer of a written response, wasn't there, on the energy efficiency. Apologies. Moving forward to the disabled facilities grants. Oh yeah, sorry. There was some discussion, wasn't there, about, well, certainly the financial position around the delivery of disabled facilities grants and the report from Governance and Audit Committee in January 2024 requiring the additional capital. And I think there was a general consensus amongst members that they would like to make that a priority during budget discussions to discuss that area, or certainly in working groups, or however those will take a form to do a deep dive into DFGs, with an acknowledgement that perhaps I think members' comments didn't have sufficient air in doing budget discussions. But also highlighting the demographic, I think, and the people, that they're living longer and perhaps requiring more support with the mobility impairments, highlighting that the DFGs are likely to only therefore increase. There was also a commitment from the officer to provide a breakdown of the various tables, I think, but to also represent the difference between children's and adults DFGs. Excuse me, I skipped ahead in my notes, bear with me. I think I had one other point, which was a request for any information on the breakdown of DFGs being awarded by housing tenure, but with a caveat from the officer that RSLs are expected to undertake their own adaptations. Again, I don't propose to take members through that item in its entirety, but those are the items I picked up that, for further requests or recommendations, but I'll pause for any further.
Thank you for that, Jess. I wonder, for the deep dive into DFGs, sort of, and try and put the funding aspect of it towards the front of our of our thinking when it comes to the budget. I think it was Councillor Pennell Thomas who brought that bit up. I'm thinking, is it something maybe Brett could look at when it's reconstituted after the AGM? Because I think we all agreed that it needed to start much earlier, and thus, if it starts looking at the sort of narrower focuses of things, maybe that will help the budget setting process to allow members to understand it a little bit more about what is potentially needed. I'm not seeing anyone's hands up. No, I think we've pretty much covered most of that. Right then, on to scrutiny review.
Thank you, Chair.
You, Jess. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. So just to sort of, again, just broad highlights, I suppose, there does appear to be a general consensus amongst members that are favouring of option 2, albeit with some concerns highlighted. One in particular was the representation, if I can put it that way, of all members on scrutiny committees. Highlighting as well the potential issue of political balance. I think members were, again, generally the general consensus that they're happy to move back to the naming of committees, subject to the caveat that the remits are not strictly adhered to, if I can put it that way, that if it does stray across names, that members are permitted to scrutinise that item in its entirety. There was concern from members regarding the length of meetings, albeit with a healthy amount of dissent, perhaps, then in terms of how that's monitored, whether that is increasing the number of meetings. Obviously, members highlighted the issue of resources, or reducing agenda items, perhaps inevitably leading to more scrutiny meetings. Something that has been mooted, I think, in our scrutiny chairs meeting is in terms of sort of timetabling items and having that strictly items time limited, albeit I defer to members in terms of having their fair say and not precluding questions, but I just throw that out there in case members want to make any recommendation in that regard. And finally, in relation to the possibility of an additional chair, members highlighted in both the main meeting and the pre-meeting that the extent of the workload of taking on 2 committees, but also with the background to that of whether that additional chair position would be a remunerated position, and one that members agree or may not agree. And again, I'll pass back to you, members, for that. Finally, then, in relation to the protocol, all I've got there is again, I think a general consensus amongst members that anybody on a scrutiny committee, that there is a level of engagement and perhaps a focus on engagement in meetings. Again, that goes back to you, members, in terms of the length of meetings and how that's managed, or how you propose that be managed. And finally, a discussion then regarding pre-meetings and the perhaps more use of the pre-meeting question in summary that's forwarded to you, members, to enable that pre-meeting to be more efficient. I think Rachel alluded to the fact that we would generally still need a pre-meeting of perhaps a much shorter length of 10 to 15 minutes. And that's just to pass any additional information to members about the running of the main meeting, or like we had last week, an exempt item to make sure that you're fully appraised of the process. So yeah, that's where I've picked up, Chair. That's been sort of the general discussion as I've noted it. But for any specific recommendations or further requests, I'll pass back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I agree. I think we all sort of agreed option 2 was the preferred option. I think the rest of it around how we manage the time and the meetings in general, I think we're going to have to figure out that between ourselves. I don't think there's something we can constitute, because I can't think we say we're going to start at 10 and we're going to finish at 12 o'clock on the dot and that's it, because we were not even at the end of the first item, so I don't think we haven't got the resources, although I would like to go for more meetings. We haven't got the resources for that. We haven't got I don't think shortening the meetings by having less on the agenda is a good idea either, because I think we will miss things, especially as we want to try, as well as COSCA tries to do all the things it has to do, as well as the pre-cabinet scrutiny. Like, we wouldn't have had the DFG report today, and that would have just lingered and lingered and lingered, and we wouldn't have had anything on that. So I think the only real recommendation really to come from this committee would be to we prefer option 2, naming the committees. I think that's probably the view of the committee. I think everything else, I think, will bore out in the AGM and in relative groups and non-groups. As long as also this information is shared with Jonathan Pratt, Sean Aspey, Jefferson Tilsley, and anyone else I've missed. I don't think I've missed anyone that isn't in a group. As long as all 51 members have sight of this before AGM, I think that would be the only other option. Okay. Anyone have anything else? Or anyone want to disagree with me entirely? Yeah, Elaine, Councillor Winstanley.
I just want to say that this scrutiny meeting, everybody has contributed to. everybody, all the committee meetings have contributed to. There hasn't been anyone who's just sat and watched the whole thing. And I know when I was first elected, I just wanted to see what happened. So I'm going to say a thank you to everybody who's taken part.
Excellent. We all share your thanks, and I'm not going to ask everyone to say thank you because we're all trying to get out. All right, if everyone's okay with that, we'll move on to the forward work programme, which again is over to you, Jess.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the forward work programme for COSC is attached as Appendix A, as usual, for the committee's consideration and to request any specific information the committee identifies to be included in the items, including invitees they wish to attend. The recommendations found an action sheet to track outstanding responses to the committee's recommendations made at previous meetings as attached as Appendix B. The forward work programmes for the subject overview and scrutiny committees are attached as Appendices C, D and E following consideration in their recent respective committee meetings. The committee is asked to acknowledge receipt of the regulatory reports contained in paragraph 3.13 as recently reported to the Governance and Audit Committee, and to consider if there are any areas of concern that the committee want to add to their forward work programme. As agreed between the Chair of Governance and Audit Committee and the Scrutiny Chairs, in order to develop collaborative working agreements, the committee is also asked to consider the referral regarding the Wales Penalty Processing Partnership from the Governance and Audit Committee, as set out in paragraph 3.14 of this report, and whether any aspect of this item should be added to the committee's forward work programme, having regard to the committee selection criteria, which is contained in paragraph 3.6 of this forward work programme update report. The scrutiny team has requested additional information to assist the committee with determining whether to add the referral to a scrutiny forward work programme and is currently awaiting this information. I'll hand back to you, Chair, for any questions or comments from members, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I think for me, on the issue with Governance and Audit Committee, I think we discussed this briefly in our pre-meeting. I'm more than happy to take that away to chairs of scrutiny, and we can have a look at that and see how, if it fits in, where it fits in, and to whom it fits in on their forward work programme. If members are satisfied with that. And then on the forward work programme, the only thing I wish to add is the Shared Prosperity Fund. Councillor Heidi Bennett has been in touch with me to ask about, we get this on the agenda. I know we've asked for it to SOC 3, but I haven't had confirmation about whether or not we can have that at our April meeting. So a chase on that, and if not, let's get it into one of the committees fairly soon. And does anyone have any comments, or are we happy and we can move and second the recommendations? Okay, everyone's nodding, so I'll take that as a move and a second. Just wait for Jess to type. I talk a lot quicker than she can type. Fantastic. Yep. Okay. Then on that note, if everyone's happy, I will take us to the last agenda item, which is agenda item 10. And this is where I take a deep breath and wait for Jess to tell me if I missed something. Nope, fantastic. I have no urgent items. So I'm going to call this meeting at 14:29. Thank you very much for your attendance and your participation, and no doubt see you on whatever day of the week we are now in. Thank you very much. Is it still Monday? Oh, there we are.